particular. Can you talk a little bit about the work that is done by the African Export-Import Bank and the kinds of projects that you were involved in and supporting?
Well, first of all, what is quite original, I would say, about the Afreximbank approach is that we are pursuing development goals, developmental objectives, using private sector approach, which in the 90s was quite unknown.
It's music to our ears.
Was quite unknown, and even
DNA.
people predicted that that was not possible because development has to be public sector, has to be government. So the originality in our bank is that we have both private sector shareholders and government shareholders, and those government grant the institution a preferred creditor status, same way as the World Bank, same way as the African Development Bank and the like. But the difference is that we are paying dividend, and we have to pay dividend to make sure that our private shareholders are satisfied. So that was the first challenge, to at the same time pursue developmental goals, objectives, and also get return, some return. The second challenge we had that probably was related to the creation of the institution was that Africa had a real risky, high-risk perception. People would perceive Africa as a high-risk place, in spite of whatever structural adjustment process all the African countries went through for 20, 25 years as a result of the debt crisis in the 80s. So that was the second challenge, because we have also to raise money on the capital market at the same time. And the third and most important one is that infrastructure in the continent is still at an infancy stage, I would say.
And when you say infrastructure, you mean?
All kinds of infrastructure which you take, whether it is power, and those are the most important one if you want to turn countries into exporting countries, meaning exporting anything else than commodities. You need to have certain infrastructure in place. Whether you talk about telecommunication, whether you talk about rail, rail is the one that is the most striking, because very few African countries have built even 1 or 2 kilometers of railway since independence. That is, most of the railway infrastructure which you see in the continent are infrastructure that were built by the colonial system powers before. So all of this has to be put into a context that help us prepare what is our own mission and objective is to promote trade, African trade, and to promote trade between African countries. So how do you promote trade between African countries when virtually all of them are producing commodities, and virtually all of them are producing the same commodities? Soft commodities, it's West Africa largely, coffee, cocoa, and so on. In East Africa, you have tea, and then the rest is essentially minerals or oil.
Oil.
It's just extractive industry, essentially. So these are all of the things we see. But the story of the past 10 years is that the continent is now really the place that is growing at a rapid pace. When you look at the globe, you look at the world, apart from, let's say, China and a few Southeast Asian countries, most African countries are the ones that are growing the most. So we have to show the best part and the opportunities of the continent. And there are really numerous opportunities in the
Do
infrastructure.
you see infrastructure as being the most promising area for opportunities?
We believe that is the most promising area because it's where really Africa is behind. Telecom, in spite of giant strides, there is still a lot to do. But more in the roads, in the ports, in the electrical power, and so on. And how do you turn Africa into an industrial place if you don't have power?
Right, reliable power.
So there are challenges in those areas, and these are opportunities for investors.
You talk about challenges. What do you think the greatest challenges are, particularly for Western companies and Western investors who may want to come in and join in Africa? What do you think the challenges are that they face, or that hold them back?
Yeah. I think the first real challenge is knowledge. Because as you rightly said, everything we hear about Africa in the news are bad news. And you're right, it's not only Africa, but
everywhere.
What is interesting for an investor is the place he wants to go to. And I take the typical example of Egypt, where I live. I've been living in Egypt for the past 17 years. Today, someone called me and thought I was in Cairo, and he said, "What happened yesterday?" And I said, "Nothing happened in particular. There were the usual riots, which you see every weekend when there is a particular event." But I can confirm to you that that is where I live.
Right.
And yes, it's not the safest place on earth, but there is life there. So one should see, to use the usual thing, one should see the glass half full than half empty. And really, most African countries have done a great job in going through that structural adjustment process, which has improved the investment environment in those countries. And people just have to be prepared to analyze it as such, not from news in the international media.
And Africans are hungry for opportunity and for jobs.
They are hungry for opportunity, and there are also other challenges which we have to admit is the human resources challenges at various levels, whether it is at the government level, where to just promote the proper environment and investment environment, there's still work to be done. But when you want to also look for human resources in the private sector itself, it's not always.
And that's what I was going to ask about. It's one of the big initiatives that IGD is working on is trying to assist in workforce development, because you're right, that often is, I won't say it's a barrier, but it perhaps slows things down a little bit, is being able to find trained employees and trained leaders, executives. But do you see it improving?
It is improving, and we are also witnessing something very interesting over the past few years. Many Africans who have been trained abroad are now looking at returning to the continent for various reasons, and some obvious one are because there is slow growth in the West in general, and so less job creation. So when you have a young graduate from an American or European university is looking for a job, after a while he said, "Well, why don't I try and look for a job back home?" Right. So we've witnessed that. Every time we do an advert for position in our bank, at least more than 60% are young graduates or young Africans who are working abroad, who applied for a job. It's increasing, which was not the case, let's say, about 7-10 years ago.
Well, that's a great story. That's a great success.
It's very interesting. Most of them before used to like to go to Wall Street or investment banking.
Right. So you had a brain drain problem
Yeah.
7, 8 years ago. Now the brains are coming back.
That's right. Well, and in fact, when it was going, it was not really a drain because they were not fully trained at that time.
Right.
Yeah, but one was expecting them to come back, but when they were looking at what was the opportunities they had in America or Europe, say the West in general, and the opportunities that they had back home, most of them would choose to stay. But now we see a change.
That's great. Well, you've been part of our frontier leaders now for almost precisely 2 years. What caused you to want to come to IGD and be part of our work?
Well, first of all, the objective which you are pursuing is, I think, it's quite complementary to what we are doing. The other thing is the ability to meet really leaders and gain experience from them and use that experience in our day-to-day work. I think that's quite useful. And I must say that for the past 2 years, I attended many of those meetings, and they were quite useful to me.
We'll do our best to keep them useful and to keep them interesting. Thank you so much for this interview, but thank you for being such a great part of IGD, and we look forward to listening to you a little later on, but working with you in the months and years ahead.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean-Louis.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
My pleasure.